Paul Monaghan.
Thank you, Sir Roger, for this opportunity to consider the utterly barbaric practice of dog fighting. I congratulate my honourable friend from East Kilbride, Straven and Les Mahago on winning this debate today. It has been an intelligent, considered debate with cross-party support. I'd also thank Mark Abraham, Blue Cross, Dogs Trust, League Against Cruel Sports, the RSPCA and the Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals for their briefing ahead of today's debate. Although made illegal by the Humane Act of 1835, evidence suggests that dog fighting across the UK is in resurgence. Indeed, it is now a highly codified and organised practice developed for the entertainment of spectators. It is also an extraordinarily brutal, cruel and unsympathetic practice, as noted by my honourable friend that has led this debate. The welfare of animals is covered by the Animal Welfare Act 2006 in England and Wales and by the Animal Health and Welfare Scotland Act 2006. These acts create offences relating to animal fights. These offences are set out in Section 8 of the Animal Welfare Act 2006 and Section 23 of the Animal and Welfare Scotland Act 2006. Despite being illegal, fights take place frequently. Indeed, several hundred, possibly thousands of organised fights. Yes, okay.
Thank the member for giving way very briefly. And just to say, there appears to be loads of legislation in place, but the problem seems to be the enforcement of the legislation and the sentencing. That seems to be the general consensus that I hear. I absolutely agree with that. I also absolutely agree with that comment, and I'll make several suggestions shortly as to how that might be addressed. As I've said, hundreds, possibly thousands of organised fights take place each year, with hundreds of thousands of pounds changing hands in associated betting at some fights. These fights are organised in pits, in streets, parks, housing estates, fields, in fact, anywhere and everywhere. 3 levels of fights are recognised. Level 1, impromptu street fights or rolls. Level 2 are hobbyist fights revolving around localised fighting circuits. And Level 3, professional fights that are highly organised, often internationally. Injuries sustained at fights by dogs often lead to the deaths of the animals involved through stress and shock, and fights do take place to the death simply for the amusement of people. I understand from the SSPCA that the longest recorded dog fight known lasted for 4 hours and 12 minutes. After such abuse, these animals are ferocious. The injuries they inflict on other dogs is scarcely believable, and the notion that anyone would wish to participate in the breeding, training, fighting and/or sponsoring of these practices beggars belief. More so given that injured animals rarely receive veterinary attention. The crude analogy applicable to these trained dogs is that of high-value pedigree racehorses. But in dog fighting, of course, the animals are expendable, abused and abandoned if no longer match fit. It is also the case that Grand Champion fighting dogs are worth hundreds of thousands of pounds to their owners, with stud fees of £5,000 to £6,000 being common. The picture could not be clearer. Dog fighting is big business and utterly horrific in every respect. We should expect to consider dog fighting as a serious organised crime. The SNP have been at the forefront of animal rights, both in this Parliament and in Scotland. Tackling dog fighting should be seen in the context of such fighting being a gateway crime. To be clear, involvement in the clandestine nature of dog fighting leads to other crimes such as illegal gambling, importation and exportation of animals, abuse of the pet scheme, animal theft, drugs and gun crime. Strategies to deal with dog fighting should therefore follow counter-terrorism strategy, engage and prevent. The Dangerous Dogs Act 1991 bans the ownership of a number of dog breeds. That covers some breeds that have been considered as fighting breeds. The Act applies to England, Wales and Scotland, but has been separately amended in Scotland and England and Wales. The EFRA Select Committee, of which I am a member, has looked at the application of this Act in the context of England and will report in the near future. Suffice to say at this point that the Act appears to be ineffective and must be revised. I say this because the Act focuses on breed, not deed. Prohibited breeds are difficult to identify and categorise, and crossbred to develop strains more suitable for fighting. We know that there is significant underground market activity in the trade of fighting dogs, with puppies being sold for thousands of pounds,
breed-specific legislation is fundamentally flawed. A startling statistic to evidence this is that of the 623 dogs seized as a prohibited type during the same 2-year period, almost a quarter were later found not to be a prohibited type and returning to their owners, bringing into further question the very concept of what constitutes a dangerous dog. Our view is that the Dangerous Dog Act must be reviewed as a matter of urgency. While dog fighting is illegal across the UK, specific dog fighting laws do not exist. Instead, such offences are recorded within broader Animal Welfare and Cruelty Acts, which make it illegal to coordinate and promote a fight, to keep, possess or train a dog for fighting, and to attend a dog as a spectator. Direct animal fighting offences are recorded under Section 8 of the Animal Welfare Act 2006. However, as the law defines an animal fight as, quote, the placing of a protected animal with another animal or human, it can be argued that street fighting is spontaneous and as such does not include placing an animal and therefore consequently is not covered by the legislation. Nevertheless, legislation appears to have had no apparent effect on either dog fighting or the recorded occurrence rate of injuries from dog bites. We believe that 3 important steps can be taken to address this problem. First, increased sentences and penalties as deterrent. Secondly, education as a preventative measure. And thirdly, policy changes to encourage engagement. Currently, the maximum sentence for animal fighting in the UK is a term of imprisonment of up to 51 weeks. However, in reality, sentences are unacceptably low, and the example set by Northern Ireland, I think, should be followed. In the US, on the other hand, as we heard earlier, dog fighting is considered a felony in all 50 states, as well as a federal felony. In 2016, the FBI declared that it is going to track animal abuse in the same way that it tracks Class A felonies for accounting, reporting and tracking purposes, and enacting felony-level penalties for repeat offenders. We must recognise that evidence shows there are links between animal abuse and other forms of abuse such as battery, child abuse, domestic violence, grievous bodily harm, serious violent offences, use of firearms, etc. As such, dog fighting should also be considered a signal crime. We are calling on the UK Government to review sentences under the Animal Welfare Act and introduce penalties that reflect the seriousness of the offences and the horrific abuse imposed on animals to ensure punishments fit the crime. Dog fighting should be recorded as a specific offence, separate to animal fighting, in order to enable the scale of the problem to be more accurately assessed. Dog licensing should also be considered. There should also be a presumption that court disposals use sentences at the upper end of sentencing scales and the maximum allowed by law, not the minimum. The Control of Dogs Scotland Act 2010 is designed to highlight the responsibility of dog owners by putting in place a regime that will identify out-of-control dogs at an early juncture. Many animal welfare charities invest considerable resources into excellent work, teaching young people and others about responsible dog ownership. Programmes specifically target young people, those in prison, others who may own a status dog or live in a community where status dog ownership is an issue. Such programmes aim to increase awareness of the issues and stimulate debate and discussion around responsible dog ownership, antisocial behaviour and the law. Third-party policing involves persuading organisations, groups or individuals such as community centres, veterinarians, schools, local government and business owners, etc., to take some responsibility for preventing crime or reducing crime problems, and, of course, to encourage the reporting of animal crime. In this way, crime control guardians are created. Crime control guardians can also be described as multi-agency task force. This is an approach which has been proven in the US to be effective in a number of communities for cases of animal cruelty in general and for dogs fighting specifically. We are calling for education programmes like these to be commended, encouraged and enabled. As a matter of policy, sentencing should now reflect the object of deterrence relative to the spectrum of offending in relation to dog fighting. The detection of animal fighting offences should become a performance indicator for police forces to add incentive to dealing with a crime. Details of individuals banned from keeping dogs and other animals generally should be held in a UK-wide register by statutory agencies. This would help prevent those convicted of animal cruelty offences from being able to commit further offences, as well as increasing opportunities for enforcement action. Rehabilitation programmes should be offered as part of the sentencing disposal, and this would encourage the strategy of education. Nevertheless, the case is that human behaviour is ultimately responsible for dog bites, and breed-specific legislation to ban the ownership of certain types of dogs merely addresses a symptom of an otherwise unaddressed underlying problem. It is likely that dog attacks are rooted in deeper and more diverse socio-economic causes, such as deprivation and a lack of education concerning the handling of dogs. All of these factors contribute to the growth of dog fighting at levels 1 and 2. Clearly, there is potential for repeated presentations for medical attention to be indicative of involvement in lower-level dog fighting and associated handling. We are calling for disclosure to police of those seeking medical attention for dog attack injuries to allow investigation and tracking. It is also clear that mandatory reporting by veterinary professionals of dog fighting injuries could help identify both welfare issues and criminal activity and operate to reduce crime. Ultimately, Sir Roger, we are calling for a senior law enforcement officer to be appointed to ensure sufficient collaboration and action to tackle dog fighting across the 4 nations of the UK and internationally, dare I say, across the EU. This individual should be responsible for integrating the 3 strands of increased sentences and penalties as deterrent, education as preventative measure, policy changes to encourage further engagement with dog fighting and serious organised crime.